You're listening to Our Space with Matt Batiste.
I think people are already doing this right now, but I also believe that in 20 years, a lot of kids are going to look back at this wave of emo, especially the Wax Bodega lineup, and go, wow, I wish I was around for that period of time. Bands like Hot Mulligan, Arm's Length, Ben Quad, Saturdays at Your Place, and Carly Cosgrove. People are going to look back at them the same way that millennials are looking back now at the third wave. The band that we're talking to today was actually mentioned in that list. They just released a new album, The Cleanest of Houses Are Empty, a few weeks ago, and they're part of that Wax Bodega lineup. You may have even caught them on the Wax Bodega tour. They're about to embark on a tour of their own, and I want to welcome Carly Cosgrove. Welcome, everyone.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Hi.
Helen,
Hello.
Ty, Lucas. I'm so happy that you are all here because I have been loving this new album so far. And I really wanted to talk to you about it. First things first, I do need to know where the name came from, because I love the idea of that title, The Cleanest of Houses Are Empty, because I sort of have this idea in my mind of where that title comes from and the meaning of it. But I'd like to hear if it's the same idea from you.
Let's see. It comes from the song Here's a Fork, which is the fourth track on the record. And that was, I think, the first song we it was weird. It's the first song we started and the last song we finished, in a way, for the record, which is a weirdly common theme in that it's happened twice, which isn't a lot of times, but it's still weird that it happened twice. But I think that as we were trying to think of a name for the record, that line just stuck out as being a very good way to encapsulate the themes of the record. To get back to it in a very literal sense, if your house is empty, it is technically very clean. If you don't have company, if you don't have people living there, you can set it up and it looks like a realtor is going to come in and show off your house to people and everything's going to be in perfect place. But the reality is the soul of that house, which is the people who live in it, are gone.
Yeah. And I feel like when you walk into a home, sometimes it can feel like, you have stuff everywhere and there is a mess. It can be like, well, this place is lived in. And I think and correct me if I'm wrong, but the interpretation that I took from that title would sort of be like, when you're kind of going through a lot of the themes from the album and the songs of depression and anxiety and all of that, you are a lot of the times just kind of throwing things out because you're like, well, I don't need this. Or, just kind of having that emptiness in the home can kind of feel like a home can even be like a person, right? Kind of going through and that's sort of the interpretation that I put, kind of having that emptiness and wanting to fill it up. So it's like, yeah, it's clean, but it's still empty. There's still you want to put things into it.
I mean, it was kind of again, because the whole record encapsulates a lot of my personal isolation that I kind of imposed on myself. It's kind of how to get comfortable by starting back at square one. It was I completely destroyed, I guess, a part of myself. And then I just spent a good chunk rebuilding. But to rebuild, I had to be comfortable. And to be comfortable, I had to be clean. And to be clean, I had to be empty.
I liked that full circle moment of bringing it around and then, kind of taking that from the song that you first started to the last song that you finished. Is there a reason in particular why that song was the last song that you finished?
Because I think that it was, when we got to the studio, it was the one that needed a little more attention. It was missing certain elements. And then Justin, our producer, that was the first song we worked on when we were doing pre-production. And he was like, okay, well, this needs this, this, and this. And you need to figure out how to make this part that you have towards the end, make it fit, almost like a callback, just having pieces that work and, harken back to prior in the song without being creating motifs musically, lyrically, and then calling back to them, changing them. So he really that was the first song on the first day we really got in the trenches with.
And there's definitely some obvious themes throughout this entire record. Ty and Helen, do you have anything in terms of, I know a lot of this record, like Lucas mentioned, is about his, mental health and kind of putting himself out there onto the record. Do you have itemized parts of your maybe mental health and stories that you guys talk to as a band, or you're like saying like, hey, I'm going through this, let's add this into a song, and kind of just sort of bringing it all in together, the three of you together?
I would say like for this record, at least in my experience, this has mostly been Lucas centered in terms of like the lyrics. I think in some of our past work, we've incorporated, like, I don't know, I've done some writing on some of the past stuff. I think for me, this was mostly an evolution of my drumming in terms of like my contribution to this record. Something that we did for this record that I really liked is we just had like a bigger drum sound. It was less about trying to have like a super consistent note and more just like, how can we get these drums to be as loud as possible? So instead of lyrics, I feel like that's the way I contributed for this one.
I think also kind of tying it back to like our contribution to just the lyrics, like we watched Lucas go through this shit in real time. We watched Lucas clean the house. like the song Random Dancing, like the dance Lucas has to do is literally like writing the album. And like he did it. Like we watched like the depression be overcome by like doing this massive task of writing this like amazing record. And I'm very proud of him because this is some of his best work.
No, I remember the day you came back with the first draft of Here's a Fork, like the first like lyrics of it. It was more in like literally like in poem form. I couldn't believe it. I was like, damn, like we're on to something.
Yeah, no, that was definitely like, oh shit, like this is what the bar's at. This is where we're going. Like we're digging in.
And the other thing too is, as much as I might want it to be this way, like, I'm not writing in a vacuum. Like I'm writing with the two of you in mind a lot of the times too, where it's like, like I think a lot of what I'm going through like affects the people in my life, affects the two of you. So like some of these songs, like, I don't know, like it's working through like my problem solving and the way that it affects the people around me.
Yeah.
It sounds like the three of you just have like a really good relationship in terms of just being friends, and that kind of shows in the music and your songwriting process.
We've been best friends for a good bit now. Kind of when we started this band, we were strangers, but as the years have gone by, we've grown to really, really love each other.
So how did you guys start as strangers? Did you guys throw up an ad on, Craigslist, like looking for band members?
We all were playing in bands that we had been with since high school, each from like our respected areas that we grew up in, and crossed paths playing shows together. And Lucas used to book shows at a place in Westchester called Fens, and he really liked our bands. He booked us shows there. And then he just like, after seeing us play, kind of was like handpicked us out of the music scene. He was like, I really like how these two people play and I would love to play music with them. And it ended up working out.
Yeah.
And nothing was the same.
Nothing was the same.
We kind of talked a little bit about writing the songs and writing the album. I noticed, the sort of math rocky Midwest emo guitar seemed to be a little less prevalent on this record. Is there a reason why you decided to sort of move forward with a slight sound change?
It was hard to write those parts for this record, to be perfectly candid. But also we kind of went into it wanting to write a rock record too. For me, it's like it's just not my bag to like write things that are technical for the sake of being technical. The guitar parts that I'm the most proud of are the ones that have like an inherent melody. And as a 3-piece band, there's only so much you can do where you can have, a counter melody while also playing chords. So a lot of that more technical stuff, it was just harder to access for this record particularly. But also, it's fun being loud. It's fun hitting people with like giant chords and giant walls of sounds. And I think that made it. And that was more apropos for this particular project too.
Yeah, I think it was like kind of like a natural evolution of our sound. We released a single prior to this record, "Don't Lick the Swing Set," which was very, very lyrical based. And up until that time was probably like the best reception we've ever received from a release. So it just felt natural to lean more into, like, I remember "Here's a Fork" was one of the first records where the lyrics were pretty much finished. And it just felt like, okay, this is the vibe of it. I also think we never really set out to be a like Midwest mathy band. That's just like, I think we got lumped into that category, which is not like an issue, but I think people are surprised that when they hear this record, they're like, oh well, what happened to this? Well, like it was kind of like never like a mission statement to have like super technical parts and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a few comments online that are like, "Oh, they don't sound like a Midwest band. Like they're not like doing like the twinkly stuff anymore." And I just think that's really interesting because we never, I thought, were in the first place. Like all of the bands that were influenced are not the Midwest twinkly bands you imagine. And we never really had those kinds of guitar parts to begin with. So I just think it's interesting.
It's also funny on like the math rock side of it. Like if you listen to some of the polyrhythms we do, like it is technical. It's just
It's
not
very
like
much
in your
there.
face technical. Like
Yeah.
it's like kind of hidden.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's also part of it is like, I love a lot of technical music. I've listened to Dillinger Escape Plan. I've listened to The Locust. I've listened to Converge, but I want to apply it in a way where it still feels like, at the end of the day, a pop song. So it's like I would rather the facility of like complex time changes and stuff serve the song than the other way around.
Totally understand that. And I mean, I personally think that this is your best record yet. I think that this is a
Thank
great
you.
record. I've seen you guys perform live before, and you do a really great job at bringing that energy. And so I'm really excited to hear the energy that comes with these new songs, because I feel like when I listened to
Right
this
on.
album, I was like, these songs are going to absolutely kill live. So it's I kind of saw what you were doing with that, and just kind of like having a cohesive record that is going to be great live, that is still emotional, where people can be singing these songs back to you and feeling all of the same emotions that are relatable, right? Like a lot of people can relate to a lot of the themes throughout this record, which is something that I did want to ask about too. I know we're kind of harping on a little bit of like the emotional and the lyrics and all of that, but that seems to be the theme of the album. When you're writing songs like about things as heavy as depression, do you feel like there's anything that might ever be holding you back?
I think any like artist is going to polish and or censor themselves a little bit lyrically. I think that is a very normal thing, and I think it's very hard for anyone to like, even if you're talking about depression, even if you're talking to about something where you're being very vulnerable. I think it's important to remember that like it's still the version of vulnerability that you are choosing to like show, the listener. I'm sure that I have like censored myself a little bit, as anyone does when they're writing stuff like that. Another thing that people don't talk about lyrically is when you're growing up, it's harder to write and be unfair to others. um, like I think a lot of the songs that people write when they're younger that are so vitriolic and so full of emotion, it's like, when you get older, you realize it's like, I didn't need to have those big of feelings. I didn't need to feel that intensely. But then the trade-off is like to become a more fair person, both like emotionally and logically and like, extra personally. The trade-off is, you know, it's harder to write things that feel as visceral as I did when you were younger and stupider.
And now you're writing these songs that are emotional, that are heavy like that. But once again, kind of coming back to like, I've seen you live, you put on that, fun show, and you're writing songs that have that sort of fun element to them as well as the emotional element. How do you sort of like, I guess, take the heavier themes and make them more fun within, I guess, the instrumental songwriting part of it. And maybe that, is something we could bring Ty and Helen into in terms of like kind of encapsulating this is the vibe that we're going for, but we also want people to jump up and down at our shows.
It's a good question. I mean, that's like our whole bag. I feel like ever since we started this band, the mission statement was like crying in the club,
I think that is an interesting question because I think it shows the kind of like way we all bring something to this band. Because, Lucas was writing like his like most heart-wrenching lyrics, and that was like what he was really feeling during the writing process. Like, I think Tyler and I were like really like, we should like really get good at our instruments and really like lock this shit in. So like we're all just kind of having different experiences in life, and like for me, I felt like I was going through a really big growth period of like as like a person and musically, and I was really like taking the time to like just like lock in how I wanted to play bass and stuff. And like I think also with shows, like we just have fun together. We love each other, and we just like to go out on stage and have fun. And I don't know, I'm not singing lyrics, I'm having a good time. So
I think also something we did for this record in particular that you already mentioned, Matt, is that like it sounds super live, and you could almost like hear it, or you could almost see it on stage listening to it in your headphones. And that wasn't an accident. When we saw out to make this record, we wanted something super, super live that like sounds fun. And we did like all kinds of like studio tricks to make that happen. Like one of the things in particular is we played around with BPM and like tempo a lot. So, like, sometimes we'll go to a chorus and it'll bump up 2 BPM. And then we'll go to the bridge and it'll come down a few BPM. And then the outro will come down. And like, throughout the duration of a 3-minute song, there may be like 8 different, tempo changes. Because when you're listening to a song live, unless they're playing on tracks, that's how we naturally play. So we thought, why try to stick to this rigid thing when we can just make this sound more fluid and movable?
So did you record that differently, almost like a live band, or did you kind of go with the same process? Because that sounds interesting. And that sounds like, you're kind of going for that live vibe throughout the record, which I can hear. I'm just curious if you did anything different within the recording process as well.
We kind of started by recording like to like an average tempo. And then we would, go back into the control room and talk to Justin, and he'd be like, oh, okay. And we like kind of listen to it and be like, this feels better slower. This feels better a little faster. And we'd make sometimes micro adjustments. I remember us like, there's like a measure that I was like, what if just this like measure or just this beat was a little slower? And then like it went back to the regular tempo. Like just getting that pedant.
And a lot of it you don't really like notice either, but you definitely feel it, which is the important part.
That's cool. Yeah. And it's the little things like that make the listener feel something different as well. There's another theme in this album beyond mental health that I want to talk about, because it seems like there's a lot around a dog themes. Describing actions or behaviors of a dog, or just mentioning "you old dog." And I swear, when I first heard that song for like 2 weeks, I was just walking around, "You old dog, like it's so catchy and so repetitive that it's just like it was stuck in my head for weeks on end after you dropped that single. But then you go through the entire album, and there's a lot more within there, like the "Get Off My Lawn," talking about being petrified to jump out, too scared I might not land. If I wanted to feed you from my hand, why on earth does it feel like you bit me? Like all of these themes of a dog throughout the album. Where did you get that idea of relating things to a dog and dog's actions?
I don't know.
I would say the same thing.
I feel like the kicker of the words in the phrase "you old dog" is old. Honestly, I feel like old comes up more than dog does. I feel like, I mean, I will say, "Steered Straight" that song was written after a conversation I had with a friend where he was like, we were talking about like, our past. Cause the band I was in before I was in, Carly, I was in with this friend. We were talking and he was like, it's funny. It's like you finally catch the car and you don't know what to do with it. And I was like, yeah. So that's kind of where that song came from, was like that conversation, but also like, I think we kind of thought it'd be cool to have that as the segue into You Old Dog. So keeping that metaphor going through that song. But I think like, I don't know, like, I think it comes back to just like, the imagery that I think we wanted to create in the record, where it was like, like lethargy almost. Lethargy was like the big tell for my depression, like not being able to do anything, or like I'd sit down and I'd start doom scrolling my phone and I just could not get up for the life of me. And I still do it today sometimes too. But like, I think that's the aspect of like, that's an aspect of depression I don't think people like, always focus on in lyrics. Like, the feeling of aging as opposed to maturing and growing, the feeling of like, not having control over, an agency over your own life. Like, because a lot of times I feel like when people talk about depression, it's like, these are big feelings. These are big, sad feelings that I'm having all the time. It's not always that.
That's definitely powerful and definitely like reflective. And I can definitely see, just based off of the way that you're talking, how a lot of the lyrics can get to be so deep and emotional and I guess reflective, because this album does feel reflective. If I'm reading into that correctly, it feels like a very reflective album. Would you say so yourself?
Yeah.
And so with all of that and with all those big feelings, I feel like emo is just one of those genres that as an artist can put all of those emotions into. And I feel like a lot of people that listen to that genre sort of go through a very similar thing, and they listen to emo because it makes them feel at home, because they're relating to those artists. So I'm curious from each of you, how sort of emo as a genre helped you in the process of growing up?
For me personally, that was just a lot of the music I was into when I was in like high school. And I think like the biggest impact it had on me was honestly getting me into the DIY scene. Um, like, you know, growing up in Philly with like bands, unfortunately I missed the era, but like bands like Modern Baseball playing in like, basements, around Drexel University, like that kind of stuff like made me want to go to shows and be involved in the scene rather than, just seeing it, being a part of it. So while like emo necessarily, like it's not the genre I listen to the most in my daily life, it definitely brought me to the community that we inhabit now.
So what genres do you listen to the most in your day to day?
I listen to honestly a lot of like pop, a lot of hip hop. I've been revisiting a lot of like older like records, like a lot of like MCR. I've been listening to a lot of Under Oath actually recently.
What's happening? What?
Under Oath rules.
Yeah.
What I guess
mostly hip hop
artists,
though.
what artists do you connect with the most?
Musically or just like what I like listening to in my headphones?
I guess just like what you like listening to in your headphones, what helps you out the most? What have you connected with the most?
Man, that's a good question. I don't know. I like a lot of like music that has fun. Like recently I've been listening to like Tierra Wax new album. I like music that is like creative and that you could tell like on the record the artist is having a good time making it. And it doesn't even have to be, necessarily like happy subject matter. Just like you could tell that like when, the artist was in the creative zone.
And then Helen, I'll have the same question for you. Like, how has emo impacted you growing up, and how have you been able to connect with it?
I would say kind of similar to Tyler. Like, I feel like emo music gave me a like almost like a career goal. Like, I always knew I wanted to be a musician, but it wasn't until I started listening to like pop punk in high school and like getting into like the Philly and New Jersey scene and stuff that I was like, holy shit, like I could actually do this. And like I have a drive. So I feel like it gave me a big sense of agency. And like for me, like I like graduated high school and like my goal was to be a musician. So like that was like a sense of like, okay, if like they can do it, like I can do it too. And it gave me a like a path to follow and something to, I don't know, instead of like college growing me up, I was like, I'm going to like make my own shit. I'm going to figure it out through punk music.
And which artists did you connect with most growing up?
I was a big like The Story So Far, Wonder Years, Citizen, Title Fight kind of guy.
And what about you, Lucas?
I feel like emo as a catch-all for guitar-based music where, you know, there's some sort of imposed vulnerability lyrically. I don't know, like as a little kid, I always wanted to do music. I was taking piano lessons at 4 years old. I like this was, you know, the thing I loved to do, but I don't think I really hit me what music was capable of until I heard Manchester Orchestra.
Oh, interesting. I love Manchester Orchestra as well. So what about them that like switch something within your brain? Because I feel like we all have that one band that we heard that one time that just switched something within our brain and we're like, whoa, music can be like this.
I was probably 12 or 13 when I really started getting into them. So it's been almost half my life. They've been like my favorite band. I think what it was, you know, I listened to My Chemical Romance in second grade. I listened to like Green Day and all this other music, you know, that was, you know, meant to be and supposed to be this really, you know, like powerful and emotive thing. But I think that I was at a point in my life where at that time, the pageantry kind of turned me off to it a little bit, where it was like, I don't feel like this is as serious as it could be because I think the pageantry distracted from it. So when I heard that and I heard music that was so powerful, but also very human. Like it didn't feel like, you know, the people in Manchester were putting on this costume or, you know, kind of like doing the sort of Queen or Van Halen levels of like, you know, this is a production, this is a spectacle. It's just like, this is the music and it's going to hit you like a truck. But and it felt like for the first time I was hearing music that was like, you know, it felt like, you know, climbing a mountain. It felt like you were just, you know, getting over your shit in such an interesting way. And to this day, those records, like those early records still, like I keep really close to my heart.
It's interesting to kind of hear you say that because I feel like music kind of goes in waves from the showmanship to like getting away from the showmanship. Like when I think of showmanship and like, you know, the makeup and the hair and all of that, I mean, as a millennial, I think back to like the 80s, right? And like Kiss and all those bands. And then it was like the band that made things switch for me in my head was always Nirvana, right? And what did Nirvana do? They said, fuck all that. Let's just go out there in jeans and a t-shirt and let's make it about the music, right? And then, you know, you kind of go through that wave again. And emo didn't feel like there was a big pageantry when I was like growing up and going to see My Chem live and The Used and all of that. And now looking back, the wave has kind of evolved into being more of like the modern baseball, into the, you know, Carly Cosgroves and Hot Mulligans, where there's less of that. And then I'm just kind of waiting for it to kind of come back into that pageantry again to kind of get away from it. It just, all of these different waves. But I think at the end of the day, the cool thing about emo is that when you actually look at the genre itself and the songs itself, like the songs itself don't have that sort of pageantry. It's that raw emotion, which I think that's really cool. Bands even like Manchester Orchestra do a really good job at sort of like elevating those emotions throughout their songs, which is really, really cool. And one of those things where, you know, you have artists that perform these songs live and they don't need the pageantry in order for the fans to actually feel something at their shows, which brings me on to your shows because we briefly kind of brought it up. You do really bring that energy when you're performing live, and it seems like you're always on the road.
Good.
It is a good thing. It is a good thing. You know, you've come to Toronto quite a bit as well, which I love that you are one of the bands that are crossing the border on your tours and including Canada throughout that, because a lot of bands tour and they just don't cross the border. What do you do in order to make touring as often as you do as easy as possible?
Damn, no one ever asked us that, but that's like a great question. Dude, we do so much to make touring.
Communication.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of communication. So I think like the biggest thing that makes it easier is because we're such close friends. So yeah, a lot of communication, a lot of just like knowing each other's icks, knowing each other's like things we like and don't like.
Yeah, talking to each other about like when things bother us and like setting boundaries and like actual like all that shit that you hear them talk about, like that shit works, you know? Like that's important. Like you should communicate, you should know, like you should care about each other's feelings and stuff. And it definitely took a little bit. Like our first couple of tours, we got on each other's nerves. We didn't, know how to sleep in a small hotel room without like bothering each other, but we all figured out what works for us, and I'm glad it does, because when it does,
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun.
And also I think like it helps. I think the three of us in general are all fairly like clean and organized. And I think like another huge thing, and not that like I see this a lot, but I think sometimes there's an attitude with artists of just like being like, the cool artist, and I'm playing these shows and whatever, not really giving a fuck. But like I think with this band, like the three of us like really give a shit, like really, really care and really want to make this work. Like, we're not late to shows. We get in, we set up, we make sure gear is like so good. We don't leave anything for last minute. Before we go on stage, we like run over the set real quick to make sure like we're all locked in. Like we really want to like do this thing, and we really want to make it special for people that pay money to see us, and like we want to really make it special for us, because it's like, I don't know, not everyone has like the privilege of getting to play shows for people.
It sounds like there's just a lot of respect there between the three of you, and that's what I'm hearing. It sounds like that respect of each other and being so close with one another like makes things easier, because I hear from a lot of other bands, they're like, tour is just it's a grind, and it's really, really hard. And that's a common theme that I hear from a lot of bands. And so, like I said, with you always being on the road, it feels like you're on the road, twice a year doing tours. That has to be rough. So it's great to hear that, it's that respect with one another. I do want to know what songs from this new record you're most excited to play live, because you are about to embark on a headline tour pretty soon, which is really exciting. So what songs from this new album are you most excited to play live?
I think for me, it's definitely "What Are You, a Cop?" Because that I think is going to be like the most receptive with fans. It's been a standout from the new record, and it's fast, it's loud, it's punchy. So I feel like that's just going to be a great energy, and that's like my favorite bass part. So that'll be very fun to play live.
Yeah. I think for me, it's tied between two. One of them I've been like really excited for since like the very beginning, which is We Don't Want Your Cookies. Just because I love the drum part I have in that. But the other is like a fairly new one, our song Zoloft. Not sure really. We haven't really talked about set lists yet, but that would be a fun one to throw in there, just because it's like a loud, in your face chop out. Yeah, that would be a cool one.
I'm also looking forward to playing
Well,
Zolo.
hopefully they like it. If it's not streaming well.
I think the two that come off the strongest from that album, beyond just the singles, when I listened to it for the first time, the ones that stood out the most to me were Zoloft and What Are You, a Cop? What Are You, a Cop was the first
Right
one
on.
where I was like, okay, like that was because I always look for that one standout song that wasn't on the singles, where I'm like, okay, which song is going to be my favorite song on this album that wasn't a single? I do that with every record. It's a weird thing that I do.
Sure.
And what Are You, a Cop was on the first listen. I was like, this is the one that stood out to me the most from those. So definitely excited to hear that one live from you. Do you have anyone that you're really excited to play with or go on tour with?
Like anyone that we like, any bands that we really like to.
Any bands? Because you've toured with a lot of other bands as well. Is there anyone that you would like to take on tour with you or go on tour with? Because I mean, you've done some pretty big tours already. Are there any big festivals you'd like to play, or any other big shows or bands that you'd like would be dream for you?
I mean, countless. Like, so many. I mean, truthfully, like one of the bands I've wanted to tour with the most, we just got done with Ben Quad. We've been talking about touring with them like ever since we met them. So it's cool we were able to do it with them on the Wax Bodega tour. I would run it back with them again.
Oh my goodness. I'm excited to tour with Heart to Gold because
Yeah.
we saw them at a festival in February and they were like, that they do that wall of sound like hits you like a truck thing so well. And they were so fucking fun to listen to and watch.
If I could
Oh
tour
my
with
goodness.
anyone, I would pick Boy Genius. But that's just me. Yo. No, that would be fire.
I would tour with Chapel Roan, though I don't know if that would ever happen. Which, back to our conversation earlier, pageantry, like, I know it kind of sounded like I was ripping on it, but I do think pageantry is cool. Like, I don't think it's, like, uncool to, like, put on a show and have a production. Like, I love those elements of MCR just as much as, like, I like it when it's absent from bands like Manchester. I love Chapel Roan. Oh, my God.
I thought that whole conversation was interesting because I think if you see us live, it is very apparent that Lucas is not the pageantry vibe. But I would say that I would disagree that we are not a pageantry band. We definitely have our moments.
For sure.
It depends who's getting the spotlight at that specific sentence.
I guess it also depends on how you define pageantry.
Well, because that's the thing. I think pageantry in today's world, it's like it just like comes off different. Like instead of like teasing your hair and wearing like leather vests, it's like you could say pageantry is like going crazy on stage and like, but it's just like a more real version, if that makes sense.
But I mean, even like Dillinger Escape Plan had some pageantry. There were early shows they played at CBGB where they'd all wear like white painters jumpsuits,
and that's hard as fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a date or a city that you always get excited to kind of go back to?
Honestly, Toronto is probably up there. We've always had really good shows in Toronto. It's very fun being in Canada. And we play it, I feel like, just as much as a lot of US cities. So
love that.
For me, it's like honestly anywhere on the West Coast. It's so funny when you're touring. It's like you're playing like a show every day, every other day, and then after like 2 weeks you blink and you're like, oh shit, I'm in San Francisco, and you're like, how did I end up here? And it's like it's just wild to just be on the complete other side of the country. So I love going out west. I love that people know us out west. Yeah.
Is there anything that you sort of, I guess, felt that you can't believe is actually happening as a touring band that's continuing to grow in popularity? Is there anything that you're like, whoa, I can't believe this is actually happening right now? Have you had any of those moments?
I can't speak for Helen and Lucas, but for me, it's pretty much every tour. I mean, I don't know. We're musicians growing up that like it was cool when people at the local show knew some lyrics. So like to be able to sell tickets in like LA or Anaheim is just like ridiculous.
Yeah. And like the sheer number of people that are there that like know the whole discography is very, very cool. Like it's not like, oh, they just know like this one song and like people are kind of singing along for that. Like there were shows on this last tour where it really like set in that, okay, all around the country, like there's like a large number of people that like love all of our songs,
even in like the most unlikely places, like Tulsa, Oklahoma, Lawrence, Kansas, just like cities that I think would otherwise get skipped over, have like a large community of people that really care about us, and that feels like crazy.
That's amazing. And I do want to wrap this up with the way that I wrap up every single show is I always ask artists who their favorite up and coming band is to sort of spread the love and continue growing the scene. Is there anyone that you have in mind that you'd like to give a shout out that's, working hard, doing the tours, putting together the music, same thing as you, and extra shout out right now, give them some love?
I could go first. Not that they're like necessarily up and coming, but I just know they're like young in touring. Saturdays at Your Place. Not that anyone wouldn't know them that is listening to this, but
Yeah, when I say up and coming, I don't mean like nobody knows who they are. Just kind of like a younger band right now that's kind of grinding
sure.
their way on up, right?
They are real ass rock stars. They for the on the Wax Bodega tour, they slept in their van for the first like, third of the tour, which is like super badass considering they had 6 people. They also
On their own volition
they
as
didn't even
well.
have to do that, but they did. They print all their own merch. And they're just like a group of like dudes that like just like us just really care about their craft and really give a fuck about what they're doing and the people that are at their shows. So like them, I just like, I don't know, they're really doing it right.
What about you, Lucas?
They've been around for a while, but I gotta shout out our friends at home, Elephant Jake and Stand and Wave. Some of those folks are older than I am, but oh my goodness, they're just like, I don't know. I got to work with them on some of their releases because I do some like producing and engineering and mixing stuff on the side. But oh my God, like the way that I've gotten to see those bands grow in the last 5 to 7 years, it's been really fun to watch as, not only a fan, but as their friends as well.
And what about you, Helen?
There are so many freaking bands in this scene that are so good, and it's so cool to see the way that they can come out of like the most random places like South Texas or like Oklahoma and can gain followings and support and stuff. So I mean, there's so many bands. I'd have to shout out our homies in Carpool.
Yeah.
I fucking love those guys. They're all just like very, very good humans, and they have a lot of swag. And yeah,
another group of people that really give a fuck.
Yeah. I am excited to see what they keep doing, and yeah.
I feel like the theme of RX is caring is cool.
Caring is so cool.
Caring is cool.
It is not cool to like be a cool guy and not care anymore. We're done with that.
That's so out.
That's
so out.
Not practicing your instrument. Nah, like we're off that.
Yeah, that shit's loser shit.
Yes.
Caring is in 2024.
You heard it straight from Carly Cosgrove. Every single one of them. Caring is cool. I love that. Is there anything that we may not have talked about that you wanted to maybe mention or promote?
We hit it. We got shows and a record.
Yeah. If you're watching this, you probably already listened to the record.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Absolutely. Go and order the vinyl. Cleanest Houses are empty. Go listen to it on wherever you listen to music, Apple, Spotify, any of that. And make sure to check them out on their upcoming tour. Carly Cosgrove, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Our Space with Matt Batiste. If you enjoyed yourself, please support the show by subscribing and leaving a review.